The world's got some crazy stuff going on with the war in Ukraine. We've got trains crashing everywhere. We've got banks collapsing. But for the most part, things are looking up in the world despite all of that doomsday stuff. And we are starting to see a couple really great technological advancements that could make things incredibly affordable in the near future. Welcome to our March market update, and what a great time to be going over this information too, because instead of just comparing to where we were at last year, what a great time to look at February and March of 2020 before this whole COVID craze started and kind of ruined everything that we thought made sense in markets. So we'll compare where we were then to where we are now. Let's get into it. Okay, so months of inventory. It is one of the most common things that we have been looking at, especially over these last couple years where we were hitting less than a month of inventory. And for those of you who haven't listened before and don't know what months of inventory is, more or less what it means is if every buyer currently in the market was able to buy a house, that would put us at 1 month of inventory. So if we're at 2 months of inventory, it means every buyer could purchase 2 houses, or really what they're looking at is it would take 2 months for all of that inventory to dry up. Now, what we've been sitting at for the last couple years is less than half a month even, meaning that 1/2 of the buyers in any given month would be able to actually get a property. That is how low our supply actually was within the market. Rather, it was how high the demand was, I think, is a much more appropriate way of looking at that. So in 2020, just before COVID made everything crazy, the Fort Hood market was sitting at about 2.1 months of inventory, and the Austin market was at 1.5 months of inventory, which was insanely low even for that time too. When we're looking at more of a normal market is closer to about 3 to 4 months of inventory. That's where you see like a pretty healthy balance between buyers and sellers. Now what we're looking at is, coincidentally for the Fort Hood area, we're right back at 2.1 months of inventory, which is honestly crazy that we have pretty much hit exactly where we were before everything just went bananas. Austin, on the other hand, is at 2.7 months. We're almost double what the inventory was in 2020 now. And it's a testament to the recession proofing of the greater Fort Hood area, or military markets in general. They're pretty stable. They don't tend to have these massive swings. Not that, they didn't. Everywhere had a crazy upward swing over the last couple years. But in general, if you're looking at a normal market that is not completely affected by some crazy pandemic, you're not seeing these huge ebbs and flow of the market, whereas Austin is going to be a lot more volatile with something like that, especially as we kind of shift in Austin into like this new Silicon Valley. And obviously people know that tech has been hit a little bit harder than a lot of other industries as of recent. And so that is starting to show in Austin as we near that 3 months of inventory. And now, before you get too scared about that, just keep in mind that we are still nowhere near where we were at during the 2008 market crash. I know that's kind of what's on a lot of people's mind, and we'll get into some of that stuff with the current events that'll bring up. But we would still have to pretty much double again, as that crash was seeing 5+ even up to 8 months of inventory around the Austin area, and Fort Hood too, when we had that crash. So we are nowhere near that point. We're starting to see homes going below asking. We're seeing closing costs being covered by the sellers, but we're not seeing these 25% reductions in value that some people are starting to predict. And following a similar trend, let's look at the days on market. So back in 2020, the Fort Hood area, days on market was about 96. Austin, about 98. Now we're back to almost exactly the same, with Fort Hood being at 94, and Austin has bumped up a little bit to that 120 days. And keep in mind, that is not how long it's taking to sit on the market. That is the marketing time where it is sitting on the market, plus how long it takes to close once it's under contract. And so you're seeing, a pretty large increase from where we were at last year, which was around 62 around Fort Hood and closer to 77 around Austin, because we're seeing a lot fewer cash offers, which are taking 14 days to close on average rather than 30 to 45. But you also are starting to see things last a little bit longer on the market before they're getting good offers. Now, another important part to remember is that is the market as a whole. Okay, the properties around Fort Hood, they're in a lot smaller buy box. We do have some what we would consider luxury properties in the area, but things like $1 million homes and up, you're not really seeing very often. And so what you're getting around Fort Hood on average are going to be a lot smaller houses, a lot more regular houses that soldiers can buy while they're active duty, as military is kind of what supports the Fort Hood area. On the other hand, Austin, they're going to have these major differences where you're seeing properties, in maybe your mid 300s, low 400s that are still selling pretty quickly. And then you've got a lot of these like luxury tiers and more unique properties because there is a lot more diversity in general around the Austin area. So when you have uniqueness, you have things last a little bit longer on the market because you have to have a little bit more specific buyer. And so that is contributing to that too. But do keep in mind, please talk to a realtor if you want to sell your house, because I wouldn't just go off of this and say, well, we're probably going to look at 90 days before we get an offer and it's going to take 30 days to close, because there's a ton of things that are going to change that based on your price, the condition of the property, the uniqueness of the property, even location, two major things. Post is a big location for the Fort Hood area, and then you've got a bunch of different points that you can be close to that will make your home sell faster or take a little bit longer in the Austin market. So definitely hit somebody up like myself if you want to get a little bit more predictability on that. But yeah, let's move on to some of the current economic data to kind of see the state of the market in a much more broader sense. So one of the biggest things that people look at is the job market in an area. And a major indicator is when we do start to see a lot more unemployment. Maybe we see some jobs that we start to lose. And as much as we've been hearing a ton of stuff in the news about tech layoffs, Austin has still seen about an 8.5% increase in available jobs this year. And on top of that, they've brought the unemployment rate from 4.25% to just under 3%, which is absolutely insane. On a similar note, but not as dramatic, Fort Hood has had a 4% increase in their job market, and they've even brought theirs from just under 6% to just over about 4.25% for the unemployment rate. So both areas are doing incredibly well in terms of the job market. While there may be cuts, honestly, it's mostly around the coast, the Austin and Fort Hood areas are doing pretty well in that realm. So another one of the largest factors that has been driving really the market interest in general, because it is affecting our rates pretty drastically, is the Consumer Price Index, the CPI report, or in layman's terms, the inflation rate. So our average inflation rate across all of the categories that the Fed goes through, it came down to 6%, which is still pretty high. They're still trying to push that down to 2%. But it is our 8th month in a row of having our inflation rate drop. So we're seeing really good things in the market, despite some other stuff that came up that I'll talk about in a second. However, our shelter, specifically the category regarding shelter, which is, obviously one of the things we're looking at the most, is at 8.1%. So that is one of the major drivers of our inflation rate coming up. So we should start to see, in a couple months, that is going to take a massive dip, because we more or less hit our spike somewhere between May and July. And so if we're looking at a year over year, basically, for this inflation rate, we're going to see that drop off pretty significantly over this summer. And, hopefully we'll actually see ourselves hit that 2% inflation rate, at least by the end of the year. And then, maybe we'll start to see the inflation, or rather the Fed rate and our interest rates, start coming back down to a little bit more palatable numbers, we'll say. All right, and then let's talk about some of the current events. Now, I am not going to pretend to be any kind of an economic expert or anything. I am doing my best to pull the current events and really just simmer these down so that we can get the things that are going to most affect the housing market, because frankly, that's what you're watching this channel for. I am not the best in terms of world events in general. So let's pick out a few of these things, and who knows, I could be right, I could be wrong, but we'll at least dig into them and talk about the impact that they could potentially have on the housing market and kind of our economy as a whole, so that it can help you make your decisions about buying or selling your property. So, big one, people have been seeing it for the last few months, is the war in Ukraine. As that continues to wage on and we continue to support Ukraine, that is obviously going to affect the US economy as a whole. We're seeing a lot of pressure put on Russia right now, where we are giving a ton of support, because I don't know if you guys know, it gets pretty cold out in that area, and if you guys know anything about history, there's not a whole lot of troop movement that people push for in the winter. So as things start to warm up a little bit, there is a lot more expected troop movement, which is why the US and NATO in general has been doing a little bit of additional support to Ukraine over the last few months, just in preparation for that. And on top of that, we've got China, who is not necessarily supporting Russia, but they are definitely not condemning what they're doing either. And so we're seeing a little bit of this perpetual war starting to wage on. Obviously, if we can get that taken care of, that's a whole lot less money that is being taken out of our economy and put into other countries. And it can be used to help to rehabilitate all of the economic pressures that we faced over COVID. So that's a big one to keep an eye on. Another one is the trains that have been crashing. We've got a couple now, but the biggest one in the news is the one in East Palestine, Ohio, with our hazardous chemicals that are, potentially cancerous, causing all of these issues. Now, a super important aspect of that is, while these chemicals are incredibly dangerous, they're also incredibly useful and are used in a lot of the products that we use in the country in general, but specifically in housing. One of those being vinyl chloride, which is used in PVC, which is in pretty much every house at this point. So if we do start to see some additional restrictions, maybe increasing cost of transport because of some additional safety measures, we may start to see prices of some materials start to come up again, and obviously that can affect building costs, which can affect resale costs, which can affect the market as a whole. But right now, that's looking like a little bit of a low priority in terms of what's concerning, because this stuff there are so many trains that go around all the time, and this is a major event, but we'll see how much it actually affects in terms of policy and trade. And then, before I get to the actual one of the good facts that I like, we got to talk about SVB. Obviously, there was a major bank in California that completely failed. It caused a major concern. It was quickly taken care of, but I think the question in everybody's mind is, this now going to be a problem for multiple banks? Overall, it does look like this bank probably did not do things the way that they should have. It was, they were more or less helping with a lot of tech startups. Again, we know kind of what happened with tech, but they were doing some shady things with their investments. I don't know if shady is the right word, but they were doing some things improperly. And that is kind of what caused the run on this bank. I would not expect this to be a widespread issue. Hopefully it will be resolved pretty quickly, and it will be a thing of the past after, maybe a month or two of people getting a little bit concerned as we start to see things stabilize. But let's look at a better note. We did have fusion achieved in a lab for the first time. Obviously, how does that affect the housing market? Well, it doesn't anytime in the immediate future. Fusion is still something that is way out there. It is still near and dear to my heart. I did mechanical engineering in college with a focus on energies, and I did some nuclear energy stuff too. So fusion's a really cool concept to me. I don't think it's going to change anything for probably another decade or two at least. However, as we continue to get these alternative sources of energy, especially things like fusion, picking up solar at a commercial scale and, maybe making it viable at the residential scale pretty soon, we'll start to see energy costs come down, which will literally reduce the cost of every single thing in the US, because more or less nothing can be made without using energy. So if we can get those costs as close to zero as possible, that only benefits our economy and frankly the world economy. So hopefully we'll start to see a little bit more stabilization, at least the cost of living coming down as we see some of those technologies improve. Let's talk about a couple other important topics. I don't necessarily know if they would be current event worthy, but good news for FHA and VA buyers, not so good news for property investors. So the VA funding fee is being reduced slightly, but it is going to give you, it'll save you a couple $100s on your loan at the, $200,000 range is obviously increasing as your property is more expensive. And then the mortgage insurance premiums for the FHA went down as well. So really good news for both of those government-backed programs that will help save a little bit of money. It may not be super noticeable, but every penny counts. On the downside, Fannie Mae has adjusted their seasoning requirements. So whereas you used to be able to purchase a property, do some renovations, and you could do a cash out refinance on it. A lot of people know this as the BRRRR method. You could do that in 6 months. They have now extended that to be 12 months. So if you've got some hard money loans or private money loans that you were planning on cashing out, you're gonna need to start looking at either some alternate options or extending those loans and kind of planning ahead some more, plan a little bit more profits into your deals that you're working, because you may have to hold on to these if you do want to do Fannie Mae refinancing. You may have to hold on to these for a little bit longer than you originally anticipated. All right, and then for this next part, let's shoot for like a quick, maybe 30 seconds, maybe 1 minute, just around the world summary of this. So if you really do not have the time to watch this whole video, or you just don't find me that entertaining, you can check this out and you can get all of what I just mentioned in a very quick TikTok video. So number one, market data, local market. We are back to where we were before COVID in the Fort Hood area, and Austin is doing a little bit worse than where we were before that. You may not see it in the prices necessarily, but you will see it in properties sitting on the market a little bit longer, as well as your ability to negotiate maybe some closing costs in. Two, the world's got some crazy stuff going on with the war in Ukraine. We've got trains crashing everywhere. We've got banks collapsing, but for the most part, things are looking up in the world despite all of that doomsday stuff. And we are starting to see a couple really great technological advancements that could make things incredibly affordable in the near future. 3, 2023 is bringing a few new changes. VA funding fees are going down. FHA mortgage insurance premiums are going down. But for those investors who are looking to do specifically the BRRRR method, your seasoning requirements for Fannie Mae are going from 6 months to 12 months, so start planning accordingly. Number 4, if you guys are looking to buy or sell and you want a little bit more information on the market, and maybe you don't want to necessarily listen to my videos, or shoot, you just want to sit down, have a beer, and talk about the market, hit me up. My number is 512-803-7226. I'll have my other information below or up above or somewhere, but make sure, get in contact. I look forward to speaking with you more soon.